Let me know when you can hear Nicole. A little bit. I heard it faintly. Okay.
I'm not staying around.
Nothing. Ah, there we are. Yep, gotcha.
Can you hear it well?
Got it. Yep.
Okay.
So, the opponent for Amendment 69 is not going to make it. So it's just Diane Schwenke, Crow's side.
Okay.
So,
Please make a statement.
yeah,
Can't really.
I guess so.
Any questions on 71?
What's that?
Any
I
questions
haven't
yet?
gotten an email.
Okay. I'm All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone in attendance, everyone listening to KMTS, KMTS.com, and watching on YouTube, our live broadcast of tonight's Issues and Answers Forum. I'm Ron Milhorn, I'm the news director with KMTS, and will be your moderator tonight. Go ahead and put it in the basket there. This event brought to you courtesy of tonight's sponsors, the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association, Glenwood Springs Post Independent, KMTS, and local State Farm insurance agents Jeff Leonard and Dee McCown. A special thanks goes to the City of Glenwood Springs for allowing us to host this event here at City Hall. If you have questions you'd like to ask of the candidates or about any of the ballot issues we'll be discussing, please write them down on one of the forms provided on the table outside and bring them up to the question box in the front row. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible within our time restrictions. I will ask the questions of the candidates and the issue representatives. Each candidate will give a 2-minute opening statement. There will be a time limit of 90 seconds assigned for answering questions. Each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute closing statement. For the offices and/or ballot questions with only one candidate or representative present, 5-minute statements will be read. There will not be a debate. Tonight's timer will be Susie Strauss. She will hold up a card reminding tonight's speakers that they have 30 seconds remaining to answer a question. Also let them know when their time is up. The order for tonight, we'll begin with Glenwood Springs ballot questions 2H and 2I, the A&I tax renewal. We'll then follow up with State Senate District 8 candidates. Amendment 69, statewide healthcare system. Amendment 71, U.S. Congress, Colorado's 3rd District candidates, 2 representatives. 9th Judicial District Attorney candidates, and Garfield County Commissioner candidates. And that will conclude our evening. We will take a 10-minute break at some point this evening. But I would also ask the audience present here to refrain from clapping, cheering, jeering. Let's keep it professional and maintain decorum so we can all hear here in the council chambers and for the folks listening at home on KMTS and on watching on YouTube. All right, I'd like to invite to the dais Steve Beckley, Community on the Move. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Steve Beckley. I'm owner of Glenwood Caverns Adventure Park and Iron Mountain Hot Springs, and I'm here tonight speaking about ballot initiative 2H and 2I. On November 8th, Glenwood Springs voters will be asked to approve and renew a current 1-cent sales tax, as well as the city's ability to bond and build essential projects that will improve safety, traffic congestion, and make our community even a better place to live. A group of citizens called Community on the Move is championing the tax renewal. As co-chair of that group, I am coming today to urge you to vote yes on tax and bonding questions. These will be 2 separate questions in the ballot, and you must vote both on each of them, that this is important to get the projects built now. Some of the projects that are being built with this money, some will be improved safety and traffic congestion by constructing bridge and road improvements such as South Bridge, South Midland Avenue, and the 27th Street Sunlight Bridge. The construction of a river walk to include river access, parks, and infrastructure at the confluence of the Colorado River and the Roaring Fork River. Construction of the Gateway to Glenwood, which is infrastructure and improvements and streetscaping on 6th Street. In addition, this initiative allows for funding for the Center of the Arts and the Glenwood Historic Society are included with annual appropriations. Other worthwhile acquisitions and improvement projects that may come up in the future may be funded by this tax. Again, this is a renewal and not a new tax. All this will be done without tax increase, and 73% of the tax is paid by non-Glenwood residents. Surveyed voters showed support for extending the current tax for 30 years. Tax collection result in about $4 million annual tax. Because of the extremely low interest rate, we're allowed to bond and construct $53 million worth of new projects right now. We are collecting names of supporters of the tax and urge you to sign up and support or to request a yard sign by visiting www.voteyeson2hand2i.com. There you will find answers to all your questions about the tax. We also have yard signs available. Please vote yes twice on both 2H and 2I to keep our community on the move. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to invite Randy Baumgartner and Emily Tracy, candidates for State Senate District 8. And rather than flip a coin between each debate, we decided to go alphabetically. So, Mr. Baumgartner, 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all for being here, and I'd like to thank the Chamber and everybody involved for putting this on and giving up part of your time. My name's Randy Baumgartner. I'm your state senator. I've been your state senator for 4 years. I have a ranching background, a cow-calf operation over in Grand County, where my wife and son helps me manage that ranch. It's been my honor to serve you for the last 4 years, and before that, I spent 2 terms in the House for a total of 8. Give you a little background. Many of you know me, many of you don't. I've been in Colorado for 23 years. Again, I've got a ranching background, also have a background in law enforcement. I've done a lot of things here in the state since I've been here, from pouring concrete to cleaning bathrooms to, 1 minute, goes quick, just a little bit of everything. So I know what it is to work and try to survive out here in rural Colorado. I've done everything I can and will continue to do everything I can to make sure that your water's protected, your private property rights are protected, and that the Constitution is upheld both at the state level and at the federal level. There's several committees that I serve on. I'll try to speak to that really quickly. I'm the chair of Senate Transportation, also the chair of Capital Development Committee that takes care of the state revenues. I've served on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy, and also on Business, Labor, and Technology. So I have a pretty good grasp of how things work at the Capitol, who to go to, and who to find the answers from. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm Emily Tracy. I'm the Democratic candidate for State Senate District 8. I'm from Breckenridge and really pleased to be here, and thanks to the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association and all the other sponsors tonight and those covering the event live. I've lived in Colorado since the mid-60s. I've lived in rural Colorado since 1977. And I've lived in Breckenridge about 12 years now. This is a really large state Senate district, as you probably know. Garfield County and 6 other counties in northwest Colorado covers a very large portion of the state. Actually has more acres of public lands in this Senate district than any other state Senate district. My background is, my longest career was in child protection. I've also worked in the courts. I've worked for nonprofits. I've worked for a police department. I currently, for the last 2.5 years, I've been teaching in the sustainability program at Colorado Mountain College on the Breckenridge campus. I teach a course on leadership, ethics, and social responsibility. I'm running to provide a stronger voice for folks here in Garfield County and the rest of northwest Colorado in the state Senate. There are many issues in this part of the state that are not well addressed by a legislature that's dominated by folks who live on the Front Range with one person, one vote. That's the nature of it. I've certainly done a lot of talking to voters, and I'm continuing to talk to voters the rest of this month and up until Election Day. I've knocked on doors in 14 different towns and cities in this district, and I've heard a lot about concerns about water and also about the cost of health care, access to health care, access to affordable housing, broadband not being fully implemented in rural Colorado, and many other issues. I've been endorsed in this race by two former Republican state senators, Al White and Gene White, because they know I'm a hard worker and I'm a common sense kind of person, and they think that I would be the best person to represent this Senate district. So I look forward to answering the questions tonight, and thanks again for everyone for being here, and we'll have a good discussion.
First question for Emily. You were quoted, and I'm paraphrasing here, from the Herald Times, an article in March of this year, asserting that Senator Baumgardner has failed to exhibit sound judgment and competence during his tenure. Can you be more specific?
I don't recall the exact quote from March of this year you said, so I think probably the best way to respond to that would be to say that I frankly believe that in many times my opponent votes more in line with his party bosses, so to speak, on the Front Range, rather than in line with what citizens of this part of the state need and want. I've paid a lot of attention over the years to what I'm hearing. I'm talking to a lot of voters over the phone, knocking at doors, and I know what those key issues are. And I just think when it comes to things like the I-70 traction bill, for example, that was killed by my opponent in the Senate Transportation hearing in March of this year. And we've already had closures on I-70 up at the Eisenhower Tunnel in an early October snowstorm. So I think there's many issues like that where we just need a more common sense approach and someone who's really more on the ground and tuned into the issues.
Response, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Again, I've represented Northwest Colorado for 8 years. They continue to send me back because they know I vote for this district. I represent this district well, and everything that goes on down there. Last year, if you followed, I was one of the 8 people that voted most against leadership, my own leadership. I'm an independent thinker. I do what is right. If you want to talk about the I-70 traction bill, which seems to be one of the large issues, the I-70 traction bill is already in statute. There was no need to have a bill that codifies what's already in statute. The prime sponsor of that bill says this bill does nothing. The fines didn't increase, the enforcement didn't increase, so there was really no reason for that piece of legislation. You'll hear that there was a bunch of people that came and testified in favor of that, and one of the things that I said is say, well, I guess the lobby can't buy me. So I voted my conscience, I voted the district, I voted not to reinstitute a law that's already on the books and waste taxpayers' money. How much time do I have? 5 seconds. Never mind.
Yes, rebuttal, yes.
Several years ago, the Department of Transportation did a study that found that on a peak ski weekend in Colorado along I-70, that when that highway closes, there's $800,000 in cost, or even more than that. There were 20-some individuals and organizations that testified on behalf of the traction law in March. Not one person, not one organization testified against it. We had the Highway Patrol, we had CDOT, we had ski resorts, we had local government officials, we had EMTs, a broad range of people who were there in support of that bill. And frankly, I don't know that my opponent ever heard the testimony. He was not there in the committee meeting for most of the testimony on that bill. So I still don't think we have the answer that we need to have, and I hope if I'm elected that I can get to work and find out how we can better keep that highway open in winter driving conditions.
Question 2, we'll begin with Senator Baumgardner. You've been critical of the healthcare system in Colorado. What would you do to improve it,
Pardon me?
the healthcare system?
What would I do to what?
Improve it.
Well, that's one of the things that we're looking at right now. The rising healthcare costs, and I'll kind of take a step back. I spent last weekend, or well, last part of last week, walking in Carbondale. And it didn't matter if it was independents, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarian, it didn't matter who I talked to. They're concerned about the rising health care in the rural counties in Colorado. So that's one of the things we're trying to address now, and we'll continue to try to address as time goes on. We're looking at legislation that might be able to affect that. We don't know how that will go forward, but the rising cost of health care in rural Colorado is definitely a problem, needs to be addressed, and we're going to continue to work on that.
No question, it's one of the top issues that I hear about from voters, and it's both about access in some of the very small communities in northwest Colorado, but most importantly, it's about the cost. We've gotten fortunate in this part of the state to end up in being the highest cost health insurance area in the nation. And so we know we don't deserve that, do we? I don't think we deserve that. And I think, number one, we have to find a way to either come up with a single rate for all of Colorado or some other way to provide better equity for the folks who live in this part of the state. It's not appropriate that we face the highest cost of health insurance, and in many cases, when we have to pay out of pocket, we're also paying very high costs compared to the Front Range. So we have to solve that. We know we have Amendment 69 on the ballot. Don't know how that will come out. It's certainly up to the voters to decide on that, and I think maybe there'll be some information on that this evening. But whether that passes or not, we have to move forward as fast as we can to figure out how to make health care more accessible for folks. We have fewer private insurance companies providing choices for folks in this part of the state. We have higher deductibles, and you all know, I think probably many of you, if you're not lucky like me and on Medicare, then you know that you're dealing with this in your everyday lives. And there are people literally moving out of our part of the state because they can't afford the cost of health care for their families. $1,500 a month and more is what I've heard about. So we have to solve this immediately.
Rebuttal or closing statement?
You know, and again, that's what I've been hearing, the same thing is the rates are double, triple. I talked to some families, again, over in Carbondale that said, we can't afford health care anymore. What are we going to do about it? And it's like I said before, we're continuing to work. I don't know if my opponent, when she said a single rate, if she was talking about single-payer health care or not, but there should be a rate that is equal on the Front Range as well as it is out in the rural areas.
Begin with Emily. A concerned citizen approached me before this evening's forum began and asked me to pose a question about climate change. Your stance on climate change, and how can the state government play a role and have an impact?
Well, it's, you know, I think many people have said this, and I say it too. It's not really a belief system. It's not whether you believe in climate change or not. It's something that's well studied, and people who work in agriculture are dealing with those changes already. It's already affecting how our crops grow when they're planted. It's affecting when water is flowing, people who are using ditch water. It's going to continue to affect us in many ways, and we rely so much on our water, our outdoor recreation in this part of the state. We rely on our ski resorts. It's a wonderful part of our tourism economy. And so the ski resorts are very concerned, and many others are concerned too. So whatever role the state can play in figuring out how to approach that, and certainly in the area of water, we have a Colorado water plan now that's looking at that not only are we growing, we're expected to double our population in Colorado by 2050, but we're also expecting that our limited water resource is going to be negatively impacted by these climate and weather changes. I just read this week that there's continued thought that we're going to have some pretty severe droughts as part of these changes that go on. So we have to pay attention, and at the state level, it's going to impact us on whether it's water and how we deal with water statewide and the gap between supply and demand in Colorado, or whether it's anything else that we're dealing with.
Thank you. Well, I believe that climate change, whether it's an issue or not, ski areas continue to open earlier and stay open later. I don't know if that's because of water that they're making snow with, or the winters continuing to be colder and lasting longer. There's a push in the state of Colorado to do away with certain types of industry that's going to affect how Northwest Colorado continues to survive. The governor has a piece of legislation on his desk that's equal to the Clean Power Plan that the federal government has decided not to push forward, but the governor has just taken it upon himself to possibly push this forward. That's going to affect many jobs here in Northwest Colorado and many good paying jobs. Now, whether that has anything to do with the amount of climate heat or not is up to the scientists. I'm not a scientist, so I can't say that I agree or disagree with the scientist. I think that climate change is something that some people take on as a genre of we need to change things. I'm not sure that we always do need to change things. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I am not going to make any scientific predictions.
I'm not a scientist either, but I certainly rely, and we all rely on science. We rely on it every day of our lives, and that's how we got to the moon and beyond, was through science. There's a lot of really important work being done and continuing to be done. So the data is out there and it's growing. And I would want to say, too, that I don't see a push to get rid of any kind of energy industries in this state. I think the energy industries, whether it's oil, gas, coal, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. Whether it's oil or gas or coal, they've always had a natural boom-bust cycle, and they will continue to have that. The communities in which these industries are prevalent go right along with that boom-bust cycle, and it's very hard on people, it's hard on communities to have that change. I think we just have to pay attention to what we need to do in this state to make sure we have the water resources for the growth that we expect to have, to make sure that we have this broad array, and we do. We're so fortunate in Colorado to have a broad array of energy types available to us. Almost everything except wave action, you might say. We have everything here. We're so fortunate. So we just need to continue to use that broad portfolio of industry or of energy sources and make sure that we're heading in the right direction for the short term and the long term. So I just think it's important to recognize that there's not anyone that I know of in government that's trying to eliminate an industry, and we hope that those boom-bust cycles can even out for Garfield County and for other parts of the state.
Senator Baumgartner, attack ads say you voted against spending $300,000 for a veterans program. Will you please explain why you voted the way you did, and how have you supported veterans programs?
Okay. The piece of legislation that I voted against was a study, $300,000 over a period of 2 years, to look at a program that the federal government already has in place, assisting veterans finding job placement. So that is why I voted against it. Now, if you want to talk about how I have felt to help the veterans, there's about 45 pieces of legislation, I wish I'd have brought the paper, where I've supported the veterans. I've either been the prime sponsor or the co-sponsor of those pieces of legislation that help veterans, like helping the families of veterans through tax breaks, helping the veterans through tax breaks. You only hear part of the story. It's the one you voted against, not the 45 you voted for. But that's why I voted against that, is because whoever was going to be in charge of that was going to use that money to to study if this program would even work. So you've got 2 years of somebody studying, spending that money on a program that's already in place by the federal government.
Ms. Tracy, any response?
We don't do enough in this country or in this state for veterans. One of my sons is a veteran, and I'm very familiar with many of the issues that veterans face. Whether it's in the federal government or state government, we often are giving lip service to serving veterans, but I think we miss the mark in many respects. And that's in regard to every service that you can think of. I've talked to veterans in this part of the state who have to go a very long way to get the kind of care that they need, or have to spend a very long time getting approval for the kind of care that they need. So I don't think we do that good a job here, and I would just like to see the state do more. We are so quick in this country to send young people off to war, and let's hope we don't have to do that again in the near future. We're so quick to do that, but when they come back home with all of the damages that they have, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever it is, we tend to not want to face that is part of sending people off to war. So I would like to see the state do more, and I would like us to make sure that whatever coordination needs to happen with the federal services, that we do a better job with that, and that we help people who are veterans in our part of the state and make sure that we really are addressing their needs and doing it in a competent and efficient way and not making them wait for services.
One of the things I'd like to mention, the same year that I voted against that one piece of legislation, I was recognized by the United Veterans Committee as one of the legislators of the year. So I have that award hanging on my wall that the veterans gave me. And if I do not support the veterans, then and this may be not exactly what I should be saying, but there's the veterans are having a meet and greet for me Saturday, Veterans for Baumgardner. So if I'm that bad to them, then I don't think I am. I think I treat the veterans very well. My dad was a veteran. Many of my friends are veterans. My family are veterans. I want to do everything I can to make sure that their voice is heard, and I believe through 45 pieces of legislation, I've done that.
Ms. Tracy, you've mentioned water in a couple of your responses. Your view on the Colorado water, the river agreement that was signed a couple of years ago, and the continual battle between West Slope water and the needs of the Front Range.
There's so much, and I'm not a water expert, but I certainly have spent a lot of time reading about it and learning about it. There's much to that agreement from several years ago. There's also a lot to the Colorado Water Plan that was just completed in the last year or two. I think we have to be very concerned about what's happening with our Western Slope water. And I know that we don't like to talk about that divide between the Front Range and the Western Slope, but frankly, we're growing out here. We need our water. We need it for tourism, agriculture, communities. But the Front Range growth, I think, is always going to be a threat to us. And I don't know how you get away from the old maxim that says that money in Colorado, or that water in Colorado flows uphill toward money. That sooner or later, the money of the larger cities, the larger companies, whoever it is going to keep pulling that water away from the Western Slope. I'm very concerned about that. We know from the Colorado Water Plan that even if the many projects that have been identified around the state by the basin committees, even if those projects all go forward and succeed, we still have a gap. So our gap is of at least 20% between what the actual need is in the next several decades and what the supply is. And that doesn't even fully account for some things that we can't anticipate. Do we end up in a severe drought again, for example, in parts of this state? So we have to really pay attention to these water agreements and not dry up counties like Grand County was nearly dried up.
Senator, your response.
Thank you. I serve on the Water Resource Review Committee. I've served on that for a number of years that looks at all the water all over the state, just not on the West Slope, but the Front Range. One of the things that we have looked at, and I'm in support of, is expansion of reservoirs, building new reservoirs, or dredging what we already have. There's a bill coming forward this year to reservoirs down on the South Platte drainage that will be dredged for more water storage during the snow melt to help them have water to supply their agricultural needs and not have to come back and do trans-mountain diversions. Now, that being said, there's water is a property right, and anybody has the right to sell that property to whoever and they decide. And knowing that Denver Water and North American Water Conservancy District has deep pockets, and a lot of county commissioners say, you know, we'd like to have more water in the county, and that's good, but you have to spend the money to keep the water. So they have the money to buy that water and move it over. One of the things that I looked at yesterday was I went to Rangeley and looked at the Wolf Creek Reservoir plan that's coming forward. Representative Rankin and myself went up there and spent half a day, looked at that, are in support of it, and looking for money to help fund that project. The town of Rangeley did put in a substantial amount of money toward that yesterday. Thank you.
I would just add to what I said earlier that, you know, we have to recognize that roughly 80% of our water usage in Colorado goes to agriculture. So I think the real threat is to that part of our economy, the agricultural part of our economy. One of the things that's, I think, positive along those lines is that those agricultural water users are beginning to look at ways, and other people are too, look at ways to not sell those rights, as my opponent was referring to, but instead perhaps be able to lease them in a way where they can still use that water on the land, maybe not every year, but some years, lease that water to municipal uses, but not permanently dry up the land. There are counties in the state, like Crowley County in southeastern Colorado, where water was sold off the land, off of agricultural land, open land, years ago. They will never get that water back. They'll never be able to grow crops like they used to, and we don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see that happen in northwest Colorado. We want water on our lands for agriculture. We want water for municipal uses for our growing communities and for our families. And we really need to find ways to help the Front Range folks who have the political power because of their population. We have to find ways to help them understand why it's also in their interest, not just our interest, to preserve water on the western slope for the economy of the entire state, whether it's ski resorts, whether it's outdoor recreation, rafting, fishing, hunting, anything you can name. We've got to preserve our resources here.
Senator Baumgartner, economy, job growth. I know here in Garfield County, this county is facing some challenges in the coming years. Statewide, there are some challenges as well with looming tax refunds, et cetera, and still having to fund education. How would you address that in the state Senate in the next couple of years?
We continue to address that in the state Senate. One of the issues that is really difficult is Medicaid. Medicaid is 20% of our state budget. With the federal match, it's about 40%. Continues to grow. 100,000 people a year move into this state, and about 10 to 12% of those moving in ends up on Medicaid, which means that pot is going to continue to grow. And with that happening, money comes out of transportation, money comes out of education, out of corrections, out of every other agency out here. The Health and Human Services and Medicaid are the two largest pots of money that we're paying out in the state. We try to address those issues as we can, but with the amount that the state continues to increase and the amount that the federal government continues to decrease in, there's going to be issues. We talk about jobs in the economy here in Garfield County. It's just not here in Garfield County. It's everywhere in northwest Colorado. And we go back to jobs and the economy. The push to shut down certain types of energy development in this part of the state is going to have an adverse effect on tax bases to pay for roads and schools and so on and so forth. And I'm out of time.
Tracy.
I first want to say on the subject of Medicaid, and then let's spend most of our time talking about the economy and jobs, but The largest portion of Medicaid budget goes toward the elderly in nursing homes. These are elderly folks who have spent down their resources. They have nothing left, so they become eligible for Medicaid to pay for nursing home care. And I do not think that that's an equation, that we take money away from poor nursing home residents and then give that to some other part of the state budget. I think that's a false way to look at it. I am very much concerned with the economy of rural Colorado. All over rural Colorado, we see many struggling communities, and I think the state could play a much stronger role in providing technical assistance for those communities. And again, part of it's an education process so that people who live and work and are elected to office on the Front Range help them understand how the economic health of rural Colorado is really in their interest too. It's not us versus them. It's part of the overall economic health of our whole state. You know, northwest and north central Colorado has a large share, in fact, over half of the dollars that are driven by our outdoor recreation economy can be accounted for in northwest and north central Colorado. So whether it's agriculture, tourism, energy, any of the sectors of our economy, we play an important part of that total state budget, and we need to be recognized for that.
Rebuttal.
Thank you. Not for taking money away from the elderly either, but the 100,000 people that move into this state every year are not elderly. And the 10 to 12% that we're continuing to add, we're going to have to address that issue. And if we want to talk about jobs in the economy, why don't we get government out of the way of business and let them, through deregulation, let them grow their business, because we at the state level, we can't make jobs. There's no way we can make jobs. Government cannot build jobs. We have to get out of the way and let business do what they do and let them grow, and they will provide jobs that will help our economy here in rural Colorado. You know, I walk down the street in Craig, Colorado on Yampa Avenue. Every other building is empty. That town's dying. I spent time in Rangeley. They're going to be cutting their budget by 25 to 30% because there's no severance tax that's coming out of these counties anymore. Money derived from energy is what's keeping Northwest Colorado alive. And with all the groups that seem to be attacking industry out here and causing them to shut down or close down, those people lose their jobs. That is tax revenue coming into the state. That's what's keeping Northwest Colorado healthy. And if that goes away, Northwest Colorado may have a very difficult path.
All right. Well, I know there are a number of other topics we could cover, but we're running out of time, so we'll go to our closing statements, and we'll begin with Ms. Tracy.
All right. Thanks again to everyone for being here and those who are listening and watching to this event, and thanks to the sponsors and hosts of the event. It's really important that you all do take a look at this race. It's, you know, the politics of this particular election year, kind of the federal races have drowned some things out that are very important at the state and local level. I have a very bipartisan approach to governing, and I'm the Democratic candidate. I'm married to a Republican, have been for a number of years now. I am endorsed in this race by two former Republican state senators, very well respected, Al White and Jean White. And that's my commitment to voters, is to work across the aisle and across the Continental Divide and get work done for this part of the state. I don't think it's appropriate, frankly, to scare people about the boom-bust cycle of the energy industry. Communities in this part of the state know that cycle. You live it, and you know how tough it is. And I think to a great extent, and I've talked to people in the industry, they say it's the world market that's the biggest driver of these changes. So it's tough for these communities. It's tough for all of Northwest Colorado to see that happen. That's why I say the state could be doing more to help provide better technical assistance. So what I want to do, we didn't talk about broadband, but I want to make sure that we don't forget the fact that we don't have broadband fully built out in all of Colorado. Rural Colorado, once again, has taken the back seat on that, and we've waited many years for that to happen here. we don't need to wait anymore. That's part of being part of the 21st century economy. I've been endorsed again by Al and Jean White. We know there are divides, whether it's the continental divide, the partisan divide, the economic divide. I can work across that divide and serve all of you in the state Senate, and I hope I earn your support. I hope I have the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
And I, too, would like to thank you for being here this evening. There's no scare here. Not trying to scare anybody, just trying to give you the facts, the reality of what's happening in Northwest Colorado. I do work across the aisle. I have many bipartisan pieces of legislation I've passed in the last 8 years. I work across the chambers. And yeah, it is difficult when there's 8 senators and representatives that represent rural Colorado, and the rest of them are down along the I-25 corridor or Denver and Boulder. So yeah, it's difficult. But you make relationships, you build relationships, and you move forward. And I've done that. I've got a proven record that I can do that. 8 years I've been down there. You know, we talk about being endorsed. I've got the backing of 17 senators, if we want to take numbers. You know, there's a lot of questions as into where loyalties lie, and they are what they are. I'm the chairman of the Capital Development Committee that looks out for all of the state agency buildings. You know, again, United Veterans Committee, Legislator of the Year, Economic Development Council of Colorado, Legislator of the Year, the Colorado Conservation Districts, Legislator of the Year. The most important award that I ever got was by 2 little girls last year. The Make-A-Wish Foundation, we passed legislation to help that go back in again. This little girl had had many, many surgeries, many treatments with cancer, and they came and made us a starfish out of clay and put that on it. And you know what? Of all of the awards I got, that's the one that's most important to me, because I did something that benefited the children and helped somebody in this state that really appreciated it. Thank you. I ask for your support. God bless you.
Thank you very much. What's that?
This will just be a statement. Amendment 69, because Rich Garrigan is not here.
Okay, so Dan Schwinke's here. Okay. Move on to Amendment 69. And Rich Garrigan, in support of 69, is not here tonight. So Diane Schwenke will read a 2-minute statement against Amendment 69, the statewide healthcare system.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's Diane Schwenke. I think I get 5 minutes, right? Okay. So I don't have a prepared statement as such, because I really did think that this was going to be a debate, and a lot of good information comes out on Amendment 69 when we do have a debate. I am the CEO of the Grand Junction Area Chamber of Commerce, one of many chambers across the state who have come out in opposition to this amendment. And I'm proud also to represent Coloradans for Coloradans, which is the No on Amendment 69 campaign. That campaign is being co-chaired by former Governor Bill Ritter and our current State Treasurer Walker Stapleton. It is a bipartisan effort, and there are over 1,350 organizations and individuals that make up that coalition, my organization just being one of them. And I think it's important that you know who they are, because the proponents I've gone up against them in debate, and they'll say the opposition is being funded by health insurance companies and they're the ones writing the checks. But in reality, it is folks like the Colorado dairy farmers, Club 20, the Colorado Rural Health Consortium, a lot of different organizations across the state are coming out in opposition. And it isn't because we particularly like our current healthcare system or the premiums, but we feel like this is not the answer. So let me give you a real brief overview of Amendment 69, but what I would urge you all to do is go to either the opposition or the proponent's website and download the full amendment. It's a dozen pages long, and I only have 5 minutes. But I think it's really important that you know what's in it. First of all, it is a constitutional amendment, and we know what happens when you have a constitutional amendment and something that is so rigid, and this is very complex. So read it. Basically, what it does is it creates a fund and doubles the size of state government in that it raises $25 billion to cover everyone in the state, and that means everyone in the state, with health care coverage. Our current state budget is about $27 billion. Here's what we also know. That $25 billion is going to be overseen by an elected board of just 21 individuals. And we don't know what the qualifications for those individuals are going to be. Here's a few other things that we do know. We do know that every single person in the state will come under the coverage for that program. We do know that there are 11 general areas of health care that are going to be covered. And we do know, because it's in here, that there will be no deductible. However, there's a whole bunch of things that we don't know. First of all, we don't know if it's going to work, because we are once again the guinea pig for someone's idea. No other state anywhere has tried this on a go-it-alone approach. The second thing that we don't know is $25 billion may not be enough. And if it's not enough, then they're going to come back and ask you for even more money. One of the things I didn't cover was how are we going to get to that $25 billion in the first place? They're going to enact a payroll tax, 6.7% paid by the employer, 3.3% paid by the employee, which on the face of it sounds like a great deal. Except here's some other things that we don't talk about in Amendment 69. Any small business, any farmer, any retiree is also going to have to come up with 10% of their non-wage income over certain limits. So we're looking at additional expenses. I and my compatriots are very concerned about what this is going to do to the small businesses in our state that are the backbone of our communities. And 80% of our limited liability, C Corp, and sole proprietors are going to be subject to that 10%. When we're looking at our fragile economy and we need job creation, we need job creators. And this will become a very unattractive state for future growth of the economy, attracting new companies to come in here, and even some of the current employers we have. It will also potentially damage access, because we don't know if the providers and the doctors are going to play. And many of them have licenses across several states. So for these reasons, I ask you to join me in voting no on Amendment 69. It's risky, it's unaffordable, and there are just too many unknowns. Thank you.
Amendment 71. Katie Dahl and Dave Merritt. This is dealing with requirements for constitutional amendments. Yep. And going alphabetically, we begin with Katie Dahl. 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Katie Dahl. I live here in Garfield County, and I'm here to talk about why I'm planning to vote no on Amendment 71. Amendment 71 is an attempt to make it more difficult for people to be able to participate in our amendment process. And it's going to make it more difficult for those who don't have means, and it's going to remain easy for those who do have means. It will shut most of us out from this direct check on government and prevent us from participating in our state's amendment process. Now, the idea of making it more difficult to amend the state constitution may be laudable, but this measure, I think, goes way too far because it reserves the initiative process just for the super wealthy. Now, if you agree with proponents that we have provisions that don't belong in the Constitution, then I think you should vote no on Amendment 71. Because Amendment 71 requires that all new constitutional amendments be required to meet these new, more difficult and expensive signature requirements. So it's not actually true to say that there is a no harm provision for when we're repealing amendments. The signature requirements will not make the process better. I think it will make it more expensive. Under the new requirements, citizens would have to collect valid signatures from 2% of voters in every single one of Colorado's 35 Senate districts in order to put a measure on the ballot. That means that a tiny part of the state could block a measure, any kind of measure, from the ballot just from one small spot in the state, no matter what the rest of Colorado thinks. So in the Denver context, that could mean that a few neighborhoods in the city of Denver could act as gatekeepers for the rest of the state, for the entire state. So I think these are unfair. I actually think the initiative process is an important part of Colorado governance. It allows Colorado voters to have a check on government and act when the legislature is not willing to do so. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is David Merritt. I also live in Glenwood Springs and have been involved in legislative issues of various capacities for quite a while. The presentation that you just heard on Amendment 69 is an excellent argument for passing Amendment 71. We need to have a more difficult process to change our Constitution. This does not change the way in which citizens can put an initiative on the ballot for a statutory change, but changes our Constitution, our guiding document. The premise is that it should be more difficult to amend that Constitution. A regular person can't go through the process anyways. It takes significant funding to collect 100,000 signatures. But right now, it's exactly the same, whether it's a constitutional initiative or a statutory piece of legislation, which can be fixed by the legislature next session if you've made mistakes in how it's put together. It's becoming a real problem as more and more special interest groups decide to make Colorado a test case for putting items on the ballot. Health initiatives, minimum wage, tobacco taxes, all of these are on the ballot this year and need to have a better test. To say that one small neighborhood could block an initiative, the state Senate districts each comprise about 150,000 people. You need to get 2,000 signatures out of each one of those. That is hardly a small neighborhood to go to. These essentially provides an opportunity for us to have a voice in rural Colorado before these items get on the ballot, and such as the San Luis Valley had to do almost 20 years ago, you have to launch a statewide battle to protect your local interest, such as is done in water in many cases. So I urge a no vote on this. Thank you.
First question, begin with Mr. Merritt. Would you give us an example of how the current petition system has backfired or negatively impacted Colorado?
Well, as I mentioned previously, back in 1998, in the San Luis Valley, there was a big battle over transbasin diversions. There was an entity that wished to divert water from the San Luis Valley and Rio Grande Basin up to the Front Range. And they're being opposed by the interests in the San Luis Valley, the local farmers and irrigators. They put these interests that wanted to export this water, put Amendments 15 and 16 on the statewide ballot as a constitutional amendment as a retaliatory measure against the citizens in San Luis Valley. And they had to launch a statewide battle to fight those initiatives. They had to raise a lot of money in a local battle just to protect their own water rights. As one friend of mine said, the San Luis Valley was lucky in that they have two exports, potato and children. And the children that had left the San Luis Valley to the Front Range contacted their neighbors and asked them to oppose this. This is one area where you have to launch a statewide battle to fight these once they get on the ballot. And it needs to have more thought. You need to be able to have more involvement from those issues, the rural issues, areas that are going to be impacted. Thank you.
Yes, 90 seconds.
An example.
An example, or is it a perfect system? Is it flawed, the current system?
I don't think it's a perfect system. I think that me personally, there have certainly been ballot measures that have passed into the Constitution that I personally don't agree with and would still like to see amended or repealed. But I also don't think that this ballot measure is about that. I think something else is going on here. That's why we have such an interesting, you could say, coalition of organizations who are voting against this. You've got Greenpeace and Common Cause on one side, the Independence Institute and the Union of Taxpayers on the other, who all understand the importance of the power of the people and the power of this check on government when it needs to be used.
Yes. Colorado has the easiest constitution to amend. This is our guiding document. We should think more about it. In fact, 33 states don't even have a procedure for citizens to amend the Constitution. We are lucky in that we do, but we need to think more about it, put more effort into the upfront work, and make sure that when you put something on the ballot, it has support from a broad area, not just the 16th Street Mall and Cherry Creek Mall in Denver.
Moving on to the next question. But maybe make a mental note for your closing. Ms. Dahl, you alluded to the economic divide that this would create if it passed, wealthy versus the non-wealthy. Explain that, if you would.
Can you repeat that again?
You put it in your opening statement to this, if this passed, it would create an economic divide, the haves versus the have-nots, those with means, those without. Could you expand on that?
Sure, yeah. So, part of the argument, and I don't think that they're not being sincere, but part of the argument is about making sure that more Coloradans across the state, geographic areas are able to participate in this process so that it's not just the urban Front Range areas that have control over what gets on the ballot. But what we have here instead is a process that requires signatures in so many different parts of the state that, in effect, what happens is the process becomes much more expensive. So it's already very difficult right now for organizations, grassroots organizations, to make it onto the ballot. But if we make it even more expensive for organizations to get on the ballot, movements, efforts to get on the ballot, then they're going to be priced out. And those who already have all the power and all the money, it's not going to be difficult for them to get something on the ballot. So that's why I think the coalitions are tell a lot. We have every living governor and almost any politician that you can think of in this state are supporting Amendment 71. And it's not surprising because they're in the position of power. And this check that we have in the initiative process is really an important one, and it's a powerful one. We're able to act when the legislature is not willing to act or when they have a conflict of interest.
90 seconds.
We're still able to act when the legislature is unable or unwilling to act. We have the power of initiative by statutory amendments. And those statutory amendments, they can be fixed in the next legislative session. It takes a more difficult process by the legislature to change those if they're a citizen initiative, but they still can be fixed. We have a very easy constitution to amend. It should require more thought to do it. Putting these 35 areas in the state doesn't really change things all that much. We only have 5 Senate districts in western Colorado. You look at the 3rd Congressional District, which encompasses 29 counties in the state. That's only 17% of the state's population in that, almost half of the state. So we don't have that much that you have to travel around, but we do have to give a thought to get out to Grand Junction, get to Durango, get to Steamboat, get to Greeley, get off of the 16th Street Mall and the Cherry Creek Mall. Thank you.
Rebuttal?
Well, I guess I would say that any campaigns that I've been involved in, yes, mostly they've been on the Front Range, but every campaign I've been involved in, they have made the effort to get out. I'm sure it's not enough for folks who are living out here. But again, I'll go back to this point that I don't think that it's appropriate for example, East El Paso County or Boulder, the district in Boulder County, to be able to organize to make sure to put a block on a ballot measure that has support across the entire state. Just because they don't want to see it on there. So essentially, you have a situation where a small group of people are having a say on the ballot measure instead of everyone actually at the ballot box.
Mr. Merritt, did the petition the signature gathering process for 71 meet its own standards?
That has not been certified by the Secretary of State as to whether or not they did meet the standards. I know that they tried to meet those standards in getting at least the 2,000 or 2% of the signatures in each of those 35 the state Senate districts. The State Secretary of State's office does not currently have the software in place to review those signatures and determine are they really in each of those 35 state Senate districts. This would have to be some specialized software developed, such as any of the county clerks or secretaries of state's office develop when they have to do a specialized district balloting. So they didn't have the way to certify that it's been done. They believe that they did meet that standard in each of the 35 districts.
And information for myself and for the audience. So I'll start with this question. Okay, what is the impact to rural Colorado with the current system?
Colorado with the current system is that you can put an initiative on the ballot. You can put an initiative on the ballot to change the standards for trans-basin diversions from rural Colorado without any input from western Colorado or other areas, such as happened with the San Luis Valley. The areas along the eastern plains could have impacts that are untold at the current time. The issues such as the minimum wage that is on the ballot. Minimum wage is very different. The need for minimum wage increase is very different in rural and urban areas. If the 72 passes, we will have a new, much increased minimum wage across all of Colorado. That may be good or that may be bad, but it's going to affect the rural areas more than it affects the urban areas. Most of the urban areas, you can't hire anybody for even $12 an hour anyways. In some areas in western Colorado, you can't do that either. Some areas, that is a very high wage that's going to impact businesses. We just need to give a thought to those other areas before we put these items on the ballot, and maybe put them into the statutes instead of in the Constitution.
In response to the same question, or?
The impacts to rural Colorado if it passed.
If it passed. I guess I would say that from what I know in my own experience, that it would be tough for rural Coloradans to be able to repeal things that are in the Constitution that they want to remove currently, or add things to the Constitution that they want to remove currently, because the geographic requirement for more signatures in every single Senate district in the state is very difficult It's very difficult. It's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. And here in Colorado, we only have 6 months to gather signatures, which is pretty unique. It's pretty small compared to a lot of other states who have this. So I do think it's going to be harder for rural Coloradans to get what they want than how it is now, because it's going to be more difficult to change the things that you don't like in the Constitution.
I guess it already is difficult for just rural Colorado. If just the West Slope wanted to change an item in the Constitution, we only comprised in western Colorado, exclusive of the San Luis Valley and the Pueblo area, we only comprise 10% of the population of the state. So it would be, even if we could get through the signature process, or even if we were just given the ballot initiative, if it just benefited us, it'd be almost impossible to pass anyways. Constitutional measures should benefit the entire population of the state. They shouldn't be just for something that is targeted for a narrow area.
Closing statements, and we begin with Mr. Merritt, 2 minutes.
Okay. As we said, Amendment 71 will require that we get signatures from all of the 35 state Senate districts. This will ensure that the whole state is involved in the amendment process from the beginning. Come over here to the West Slope before you put a measure on the ballot. Prove that you have statewide support. It's our Constitution too, and we should be engaged. The premise behind 71 is that it should be harder to amend the Constitution. That's not the case right now. It's very easy to amend the Constitution. In fact, it's as easy to change the Constitution as it is for a statutory measure. As more and more special interest groups decide to use Colorado as a petri dish to test, can we get this issue passed in Colorado? If we get it passed here, maybe we can take it to the rest of the 50 states. You know, this has happened with a lot of things. We saw it with marijuana. We're seeing it as more states get interest in changing the Constitution for minimum wage. You know, we have to fight these battles throughout the state of Colorado. It's difficult. It requires raising money, large amounts of money, to oppose these initiatives. This addresses the problem by raising the bar. That's why it's called Raise the Bar, for future constitutional initiatives, by asking the proponents to seek out other areas of the state, not just the Front Range, and receive statewide input on this before they go to the general population, and to get a 55% support on the ballot instead of just 50% plus 1 vote. I ask for your support in opposing Amendment 71 on the ballot this November, and thank you for your time to listen to this.
Opposing or supporting?
I ask for your support in opposing.
Great. Well, I'm going to jump right to a couple things that we didn't have a chance to talk to. One is this new 55% vote threshold for constitutional amendments. I think it's contrary to the principle of majority rule. It would allow a minority of the state's voters to block a reform supported by the majority. For example, in the late 1800s, before we even had the citizen initiative process, voters approved women's suffrage with 54.7% of the vote. So if Amendment 71 were in place, and it applies for both referred and initiated amendments, women's suffrage would not have been adopted, at least not that year, even when there was strong support. Also, I do think there are other steps that we can take to make the process better without effectively taking away the right to the initiative process for grassroots efforts. The reason the initiative process is used as opposed to the propositions is because proponents are worried that once they pass something into state law, that lawmakers will immediately work to repeal or water down what they just have done. So I would suggest perhaps an incentive might help the situation here, where you have a period of time after a proposition passes where the state legislature is not allowed to touch what the voters have done, to allow a little bit more time for the law to start working. Thank you. The initiative process is there in the first place as a check. as a check for when the legislature is not willing to act. So it doesn't make sense to try and use it if it's immediately going to be undermined. Also, it's not that easy to amend the Constitution. I'd say 17 other states allow this, and of those, 12 have stronger time periods to obtain signatures. And here in Colorado, okay, thank you. If you want to know more, no on 71.co.
All right, we are going to take a 10-minute break, stretch your legs, grab some refreshments out in the lobby, and when we come back, we will have statements for the U.S. Congress. 10-minute break. All right, we'd like to welcome back our listeners on KMTS, KMTS.com, and those watching on YouTube to our Issues and Answers Forum put on by the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association, Post Independent, KMTS, State Farm Insurance, and the City of Glenwood Springs. We will continue, and our second half begins with statements read by representatives for the 3rd Congressional District candidates. Reading a statement on behalf of Gail Schwartz is John Stevens, and on behalf of Scott Tipton is Dave Merritt. We'll begin with Mr. Stevens, 5 minutes.
Can I make that one correction for the record? Okay, I do need to make one correction for the record. You queried me on my closing statement. My very last words in the closing statement was that I ask your support in opposing. I was thinking about too many different constitutional initiatives at the time, and I ask your support in passing Amendment 71. I support Amendment 71, so I had too many things on my mind at the time, so I'm sorry.
Can folks in the back hear me now? Much better? Okay. I mean, I can really speak out, but now I've got a mic here, so. All right. Reading on behalf of Gail Schwartz for 3rd Congressional District, John Stevens, 5 minutes.
Good evening. Gail apologizes for not being here tonight. She did plan to be here. As you can see, I was kind of a last-minute substitute for her. I'll read a statement from her. Gail Schwartz is running for Congress to fight for the values we hold sacred in southern and western Colorado: our pure water, our public lands, our family farms and ranches, and our outdoor recreation and tourism. Having lived on the western slope for over 40 years, and having run and won 3 challenging races for public office, Gail strongly identifies with the people and values of southern and western Colorado. Gail has dedicated her life to making Colorado the best possible place to live, work, and raise a family. Her motto is, "No one will ever work harder to represent you," and her colleagues on both sides of the aisle have attested to this. Listening to the residents of rural Colorado has always been Gail's priority. As a business executive in the ski industry, as a developer of affordable public housing, as a member of the CEU Board of Regents, and as a 2-term state senator representing diverse communities. The people that she has had the privilege of serving know that Gail has always stood on their side, not on the side of special corporate interests. Gail knows that the solutions are often found in the middle. She delivered results in the state Senate by reaching across the aisle. 95% of the hundreds of bills that she carried and passed were bipartisan. Gail recognizes that we've kept our state extraordinary by protecting and preserving access to public lands for over a century. Colorado's 3rd Congressional District includes southern Colorado, the San Luis Valley, and the Western Slope. It is our country's most beautiful congressional district, and having lived and worked in it for over 40 years, Gail understands the extraordinary value of our public lands and wild places. 3 of the 4 national parks in Colorado are located in Colorado's 3rd Congressional District: Mesa Verde, Great Sand Dunes, and the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. The 3rd Congressional District also enjoys 6 national monuments, a national heritage area, approximately 11 million acres of national forest land, and nearly 30 national wilderness areas. Colorado also has 42 state parks, along with 350 state wildlife areas and many acres of locally owned public lands. Public lands are the backbone of our state's outdoor recreation economy, which accounts for nearly $34 billion in state economic activity annually, supporting 350,000 jobs. Gail believes that our public lands are worth standing up for, and we must not take them for granted, given the movement to sell or lease our American public lands in the interest of short-term profit. To Gail and to most of the people she has met on the Western Slope and in southern Colorado, that's just not acceptable. Our public lands are our legacy, our economy, and our future, and we must continue to build one of the strongest economies in the West by maintaining a balanced use of public lands for agricultural grazing, recreation, and habitat preservation, along with appropriately located mineral and oil and gas production. If Gail is elected to represent the Western Slope and Southern Colorado in Congress, she will protect our public lands so they will remain properly managed and in public hands to benefit generations to come. The people of the 3rd Congressional District deserve a strong advocate, and Gail will fight to deliver the results and solutions we need to address the important issues facing rural Colorado. For detailed information on these issues and others, you can go to Gail's website, gailschwartzforcongress.com.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, 5 minutes.
Thank you. As you know, the 3rd Congressional District is very large, 29 counties, and Scott could not be here today for this, and I was asked to read a statement from Scott, which is a direct statement from Scott. My sincerest apologies that I could not attend today. This election comes at a critical juncture for our country. Many parts of our country, including many parts of the 3rd Congressional District, are still struggling economically. A big part of this stagnation is the fact that we have had an administration over the past 8 years that's been legislating and regulating by executive order and bureaucratic decree. We now have an unprecedented $2 trillion regulatory burden in our economy. President Obama's Clean Power Plan is a perfect example of this, and I welcomed the Supreme Court's decision to halt implementation of the plan. Unfortunately, our governor has suggested that he may take a page out of President Obama's playbook and proceed with his own executive action on climate change. The separation of powers is a key characteristic of our democracy. I have co-sponsored the Separation of Powers Restoration Act for just that reason, to restore legislative authority to Congress and to the keep the executive branch in check. I will continue to be a vocal proponent for an all-of-the-above energy policy, something that I have proposed in legislation in the House of Representatives. But we have to make sure that our energy development is done responsibly. I sponsored legislation to designate the Hermosa Creek Special Management Area and to create the Chimney Rock National Monument because I care deeply about our natural and cultural heritage in Colorado. The Water Rights Protection Act and the Healthy Forest and Wildfire Prevention Act are just further examples of the work I've done to protect our land, water, and Western way of life. And contrary to my opponent's allegations, I have not been an advocate of the wholesale selling off of public lands in Colorado or the rest of the Western U.S. I currently have the honor of serving on the House Financial Services Committee. As a small business owner for 30 years, I know firsthand how redundant regulations can send businesses scrambling to make ends meet. Creating lean but effective financial regulation is our primary goal. To achieve the regulatory goal with the least financial impact on that business, I sponsored the Taylor Act for just that reason. Dodd-Frank has regulated our community banks and local credit unions out of existence because they regulate those organizations the same way they would regulate a big bank on Wall Street. My legislation would create different tiers of financial regulation based off of the systemic risks that the institution proposed to the greater financial system, freeing up capital for community banks to lend to families or companies to buy their first home or expand their businesses. My number one priority is to create jobs and the prosperity of the people and the families of the 3rd Congressional District in all of Colorado. A responsible and affordable energy supply, common sense financial regulations, and the protection of our water and land are just a few of my accomplishments. And if you re-elect me to a 4th term, I hope to return with many more. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you for the opportunity to address you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Next up, district attorney candidates. If I could remind folks to just silence your cell phones, please, for the next hour or so. Much appreciated. And while candidates are up here speaking, if you could avoid roaming around the room, that would be appreciated as well. just as a courtesy. On the dais, we have Sherry Kaloya, the incumbent, Jeff Cheney, Republican challenger, and unaffiliated Chip McCrory. Gentlemen, thank you. Ms. Kaloya. We'll begin with Sherry Kaloya, 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you all hear me? I was elected 4 years ago to bring common sense and good judgment back to the DA's office. I defeated the prior administration. I'm asking for 4 more years because I believe I've done a good job. I've made changes to the staffing. I've brought programs such as diversion, which gets 80 people a year out of the system. These are low-level young adult offenders who successfully complete a program. They end up without a criminal conviction. I demand more of our police. That's something that's been criticized, but isn't that what we demand of people, to ask more of them? I've got a conviction rate at trial of about 75%. That's a good rate. I collaborate with the community. I work with Mine Springs, the hospitals, Riverbridge, Department of Human Services, the jails. I also supervise and train my employees. I created a handbook for new attorneys. This was the first time there's been such a thing in this district, so that new attorneys who come to the office to prosecute know what they're supposed to do. I've created a personnel policy, which we didn't have before. I've hired and maintained excellent attorneys in my office. They're doing a great job. The DA's office, it's a very hard job to please anyone. People who come to the DA's office and know their DA generally do so under bad circumstances. However, I think I've done a great job. I'm independent, I'm hardworking, and I am not afraid to do the right thing.
Mr. Cheney, 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Cheney, and I'm asking for the honor to represent you as your next elected district attorney. I want to thank the chamber. I want to thank those of you who are in attendance, and thank those of you who are at home taking time to listen to a very competitive race. Integrity, leadership, experience. These are the 3 qualities that we lack today from our district attorney. Integrity is doing the right thing despite politics, despite pressure, despite partisanship. It's not doing the thing because it's an election year. Integrity is doing the right thing regardless of when the election is going to happen. Leadership. Our district attorney needs to be a leader in our community. Over 20 years ago, I graduated from officer candidate school and became an Army officer, an infantry officer, and a paratrooper. And I learned that servant leadership is the key hallmark of a leader. And servant leadership is never asking someone to do something you don't know how to do or something you're not willing to do. I submit that I've spent 10 years in our courtrooms trying cases, murders, rapes, domestic abuse, and drunk driving. I will never ask a deputy DA to try a case that I'm not willing to try myself or not capable of trying myself. Lastly, experience. I think out of all of the candidates here, I have the best experience to meet the qualifications for the district attorney. I have 10 years of experience. And you know as well as I, if you're either a victim of a crime or accused of a crime, you can't afford to have someone who lacks experience as your district attorney. Lastly, experience tells me that the district attorney has to get along with people. The district attorney has to create a we rather than us and them. Right now, we have an environment of an us and them. There is no collaboration in law enforcement, and I don't think it's fair to use that to champion I hold law enforcement accountable when the people are ready to hold the district attorney accountable for failing to prosecute criminals. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chip McCrory. I am the independent candidate running for district attorney. Political parties can put up their candidates. To be an independent requires me going out and getting hundreds of signatures to be on the ballot. And I will throw out that there is talk currently that if you vote for an independent, you're throwing your vote away. That's not true for a district attorney. It might be for a legislature, it might be for a president, but the district attorney does not have to form coalitions to pass legislation. The district attorney just has to do what the job calls, which is the prosecution of crimes in this judicial district. My experience is, despite Mr. Cheney's claim, greater than his. I started out in 1980 working for the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office, which is the west half of the metropolitan Denver area. There I started doing traffic and misdemeanors, and when I left 4 years later, I was doing felonies, first-degree murders, serious rapes, and I was a team leader, meaning I was responsible for training and guiding 3 other attorneys in that office. In late 1984, I got a job offer up here from then District Attorney Milton Blakey, and I came up to Aspen starting January of 1985 and worked 12 years for Milt. I started as Chief Deputy running the Aspen DA's office and finished as the Assistant DA, the second in command of the office. Milt unfortunately lost the '96 election, and I didn't wish to work for a successor. I've been in private practice since then. I have done every possible thing that comes with the district attorney's office. I have tried cases, run the grand jury, done appeals. I've worked with the police on serious investigations, and I know the other side of the coin from being a defense attorney. I know how it affects victims, jurors, defendants, the police, and the district attorney's office. I would ask your consideration and your vote this fall. Thank you.
We begin our questioning with Mr. Cheney. In your opinion, when is it appropriate to make plea deals in a criminal case?
In my opinion, it's the prosecutor's job to draw from their experience of trying cases and being able to evaluate the strength of the evidence, the strength of the witness's testimony that you may offer. And the only way that you can do that is to have to try cases in court. And so what I believe is that it would be my duty to consult with the victims first when there's a victim of a crime. And when I choose to plea bargain a case, I would make sure that the victim is informed, make sure the victim has input, and make sure that the victim is supportive. I would also evaluate the evidence and ensure the evidence is substantial or lacks substantiation in order to justify either pleading the case or not pleading the case.
Mr. McCrory, 90 seconds.
Every case must be evaluated on its own merits, and the question that comes up in every case is what is an appropriate disposition? If a district attorney is not willing to make a plea bargain, he must be willing then to take that matter to trial, because there is nothing for a defendant to accept if there's no plea bargain. It's a matter he might as well go to trial, roll the dice with a jury, and see what's going to happen. Most cases get plea bargained. There were about 700 felony cases in this district in 2015. We have 5 district court judges. If they did nothing except criminal cases, they would have to do about 250 of those 700 cases. Answer is you have to plea bargain. The secret is to know which ones, what is an appropriate plea bargain, and of course you have to consult with victims, you should consult with the police. Consulting with victims is actually mandated by the Colorado Constitution at this particular point, but you must work with the police, and you have to actually listen to the other side and see if there are issues that you may not be aware of in the prosecution's case that would affect you and make your decision differently as a prosecutor, because your sole judge or sole purpose as a district attorney is to do justice, not merely convict. Thank you.
Is something that is done regularly because there are way too many cases to be able to try all of them. It is something that is done in every single district, and it is something that can be done to get justice within the system. Victims are notified. They have to be notified. We have a big victim witness staff who does notification of victims on a regular basis. Victims are informed. Victims are consulted before plea bargaining. But victims don't dictate when a case goes to trial and when a case doesn't. What we have to look at is the triability, the provability of the case. Because if we don't, we're wasting a lot of time, we're wasting a lot of resources trying a case that we cannot prove to a jury or we cannot prove all the charges. And so I submit to you that I have the experience, and I've shown I have the experience over the past 4 years in a good trial record with my deputies. And we've been very successful at trial. And we do dispo those cases that we cannot prove. Sometimes the victims are unhappy. That's part of the business. Just being victims in the first place makes it very difficult for them. But we are the stewards of what should go to trial and what should not go to trial. And I think we've made a very good showing in the past 4 years.
And unfortunately, with time constraints and having three candidates, there's very little time to go back and forth with rebuttals and so forth, but you can use your time as you see fit if you care to respond to certain statements. Next question will be with Mr. McCrory. If elected, how will you implement restorative justice in your office?
Well, restorative justice is a concept where it's not merely the criminal courts that hand out punishment to a defendant, but that the defendant should, as part of the rehabilitation process, meet with the victim and have that sort of situation mediated where perhaps the defendant starts to understand the harm he has caused to that victim. The victim starts to be able to put a face on the person who harmed them, express their concerns, and that there is sort of a mediation process that goes on, hopefully so that the defendant will learn that their crimes have consequences and faces on that. Obviously, in some cases, that's not possible, for example, murder. But meeting with a person's family, if the victim's family wants to do that, is part of the restorative justice process. But of course, not every defendant or defense attorney wants his client to do that. But for low-level cases, minor felonies, and for misdemeanors, it's a very useful tool because a lot of those are not major criminals, but they've done things that are thoughtless or they're not thinking about their consequences, and the restorative justice process helps bring their attention to that in the hopes, which is the hope of the criminal justice system, that defendants do not return after their first trip through.
Ms. Kaloya, 90 seconds.
Restorative justice is something that I explored early on in my tenure as district attorney. I met with restorative justice people from Denver, talked about the system, participated in events regarding restorative justice, and instituted a program of restorative justice in the office. The restorative justice process is a difficult one for many victims, and many victims have refused to participate in that process, believing that they've already spent untold hours of their own time on this and they don't want to do it anymore. If the victim doesn't want to participate, restorative justice can't go forward. And that is the reality that I found. However, there has been 7 or 8 successful restorative justice sessions that I have had with people, and I don't do it myself, I referred it out, that were very, very successful. One was a case of extortion involving a car accident and some people that did not have status in the community, and another guy who tried to extort money from them for an accident. That was a very successful process in Aspen, in which the people were able to show the defendant how this hurt them. And they did, in fact, come to conclusion on that case, and it was a successful resolution. Doesn't work in many cases, but when it does work, it is a good process.
Mr. Cheney.
First of all, I agree with Mr. McCrory. It is the DA's job to seek justice, not a conviction. I believe that every person who has a genuine, earnest desire to rehabilitate ought to be given that opportunity. Restorative justice gives our system and the offenders who are involved in it and the victims an opportunity to be made whole. But in order for restorative justice to work, first the offender has to accept responsibility for the wrong committed. Second, that offender has to get into the mind of the victim and understand the impact on the victim. And thirdly, we demand of that offender to dig deep down inside to figure out how to make amends and to make that victim whole. I believe in restorative justice so much that I attended a conference 2 weeks ago in Vail, Colorado, our state restorative justice conference. And at that conference, I met with State Representative Pete Lee, who is interested in instituting restorative justice as a mandate in our criminal justice system. And he asked me to participate in that roundtable discussion. And as a result of that participation, I pledged within the first 6 months, if I'm honored to represent you as your district attorney, I will initiate and form a restorative justice task force, which will be comprised of folks with specialized training in victim advocacy and the impact of crimes on victims. And we will institute restorative justice when appropriate and where appropriate.
Next question, begin with Mrs. Kaloya. Would you describe your relationship with local law enforcement in the 9th District?
That is obviously the hot question of the night. My office has an excellent relationship with local law enforcement. Now, you've heard criticism of me from the sheriff and others, and I'll tell you right now, it's politics. That's what it is. The sheriff's office does a good job. They're in and out of my office every single day. They use my investigators to help them on cases, as do other police agencies, and we work together. We work together every day, and to say that we don't work together would be saying the sheriff's office doesn't do their job, or that my office doesn't do their job. And both of us do our jobs, and they do it well. Are there conflicts? Yes, there are. And there's going to be conflicts in this system. And I'm going to call police officers to task and say, I'm sorry, we don't have it in this case. And that's what you want in a district attorney. You want somebody who's going to give a true and honest review of the case and whether it can be proven in court, because we don't want to bring people into the system, force them to spend lots of money on an attorney if we can't prove the case, if we don't believe that they're guilty. And I can tell you that the system works, and it works just fine. The sheriff's office complains, obviously, but isn't that what we want? People who have different viewpoints and who are asking others the hard questions?
Mr. Cheney, I'll rephrase the question. During your time in the DA's office, what type of relationship did the office have with law enforcement? How important is that?
It's so important that despite having a personality conflict with the law enforcement officer, I have a professional and ethical obligation to put aside my personal differences and work with that law enforcement officer and that agency. I can't afford to allow our district to become less safe because law enforcement doesn't trust me, doesn't want to work with me, doesn't want to wake me up in the middle of the night and ask for my advice. And so when I worked with law enforcement, I can tell you that I was awakened many times in the middle of the night to help aid and assist law enforcement to perform a constitutional investigation, to aid and assist in the collection of evidence, and to begin formulating a theory of the case before the case is even filed. And in order to do that, I had to have the respect of law enforcement. If you start from one end of this district and go to the other, you will talk to law enforcement agents who do not trust our district attorney, who do not want to work with our district attorney, and that's making us less safe. It's my obligation to do everything I can to work with law enforcement. And what I want to stress here is that holding a law enforcement officer to task is what I have done many times. As a matter of fact, I've walked out of this building many times having made no one happy, absolutely no one, the police, the judge, the defense attorney, and as a result of that, I did my job. I'm not a rubber stamp for law enforcement. I don't believe in that, but I do believe that we have to put aside petty personality conflicts and differences and work with law enforcement because that's what we're asking you to elect us to do.
Mr. McCrory.
Well, as the defense attorney in the room, I can tell you that for 19 years, I have been bedeviling the police departments of this district as part of my representation of various criminal clients. However, my 16 years as a prosecutor has also served me well in that those police officers also respect me. I have actually represented police officers when they have fallen afoul of the law. I have gotten referrals for members of their family, and I will say that they respect me professionally and personally. When I was with the district attorney's office in Aspen, I was basically on call for 12 years as the chief deputy in the Aspen office, which meant that if there was any sort of a circumstance where we had to approve a warrant, because back then Judge DeVilbiss insisted that every search warrant or arrest warrant be screened by a district attorney before he saw it. So 3 o'clock in the morning, a cop come by my house, we'd go over it, send it off, and hopefully Jay would approve it. There was one monumental night when he rejected it 4 separate times. But that's part of the business in being a district attorney. I say I worked homicides with police officers. I worked a cold case with Gary White of the Aspen Police Department on a homicide for almost 9 months. We met almost every day. I was trained as part of a DA that you go over and you meet with the police, you look at the evidence before your case comes up, and you talk with the police. That is integral part of that, and I believe I still have the respect of the police agencies in this district from Rio Blanco County all the way to Aspen. Thank you.
And I have received some questions from the audience that some are almost too specific in nature, so I need to keep it more general for the sake of tonight's format. Mr. Cheney, how do you feel about incarcerating people with drug problems? Is there a better way?
I think that incarcerating people with the drug problem has failed us as a policy. However, we must have consequences in our judicial district. There are 6 goals or focuses that I have as a candidate for district attorney, and number 5 is consequences. Number 4 is restorative justice. I put restorative justice ahead of consequences, but what I can tell you is that a drug offender needs help, and we have to give them the help that they need by providing opportunities to go to drug court, by providing support systems to them from their families and their community and their employer. I helped establish the 9th Judicial Drug Court, and as a prosecutor who prosecuted a number of offenders in drug court, I became friends with quite a few of them. And in fact, I had one befriend me and build a house right next to mine using my power and my water. And he said, "You made me a felon, but you made me a better man because you believed in me and you gave me an opportunity and you supported me and you asked my family to do the same." So incarceration is not always the answer. But sometimes, if there's persistent, pervasive ignoring of the law, there has to be predictable consequences for the offenders in our district. But part of those consequences require you to prosecute. Dismissing drug offenders deprives them of a system that we've established here to help them get better. And that's what I desire to do.
Mr. McCrory.
Well, I don't think anyone has said that we should be dismissing drug cases. Although, with the legalization of marijuana, the number of marijuana cases has dropped markedly, and there has not been an increase in, for example, driving under the influence of drugs, marijuana, things like that. So, what one must realize is the criminal justice system is the last resort for a number of social issues. It is the last resort where crazy people, when they don't know what else to do with them, get sent to the jail under the theory that the jail will be able to protect them and keep them from being hurt. Drug cases get treated much the same way. People get arrested, sent to jail, and then we have a situation where our jails and our probation departments do not do a good job on the rehabilitation. Our prisons have almost nothing in the way of valid, good rehabilitation and treatment. And so if you're merely locking people up, sending them to prison, when they come out, they're worse, and they have not cured their drug problems in the least. I support very much more modern rehabilitative methods there in probation. I think that the drug court is a good start, but a lot of the treatment that's available right now for heavy drug addiction is not working, and we see a lot of repeat offenders because, frankly, we've never met their addiction issues in the first place, and they keep coming back with possession of felony drugs.
Ms. Kawaya.
I like to separate the offenses between drug offenses where all you have is a drug offense and offenses that involve drugs but also involve burglary or theft or stealing in order to support a drug habit. If we've got offenses such as breaking into somebody's house, breaking into somebody's car, stealing to support a drug habit, yes, drugs are a problem, but that person needs to be treated as a burglar or a theft or a thief. And unfortunately, that is a good portion of the offenses that we see are drug offenses combined with some sort of a theft. And even though we can try rehabilitation and rehab, it doesn't always work, and jail or prison is sometimes necessary. For those drug offenses where what we have are truly drug offenses without the other things, we have to spend our efforts on rehabilitation. We have to be looking at other methods to get these addicted people off of drugs and into a better place in society. It has been difficult, but I don't support jail for those people who don't commit other offenses, and I do support rehab.
Mr. McCrory, if elected, how would you go about hiring and retaining strong and competent staff?
Currently, there is a big gap in the district attorney's ranks. Ms. Kaloya has had at least 13 or 14 deputy DAs who have left her office in the course of her 3.5 years in office. Some have gone to better jobs, but some have left without any jobs in existence, and some have left to other jobs that frankly paid less and were basically just a job that they took because they had no place else to go. Being a district attorney is actually a lot of fun. And if you have a good office atmosphere, you have well-trained lawyers, and you have reasonable wages, you will normally find that in this particular part of Colorado, people like working for the district attorney's office, they like living here, they like recreating here, and it's not hard to keep them. If they keep leaving, there has got to be a problem someplace. Currently, the wages are pretty good. A starting attorney fresh out of law school is getting paid around $50,000 a year. When I left the DA's office in 1997 as the assistant DA, I was getting paid $54,000 a year. So I don't believe wages are an issue, but I think there are issues with regards to Sherry's management style, and there must be other issues in the office for that great turnover.
Ms. Kaloya.
Well, I'd like to respond. Mr. McCrory couldn't be more wrong. Young attorneys who become district attorneys as county court deputies come to this community, this is their first law job, and you can anticipate that they will stay from 2 to 4 years. They are generally not career prosecutors. It is a first-time job, and they're going to move on. And several of the people in my office have moved on. When Mr. McCrory was in the DA's office, several of the people in that office moved on. Some of the people didn't even talk to him because it was so volatile in the office, but generally people moved on. When Mr. Cheney was in the office, several people moved on. That's the way it goes. I have 2 senior people who moved on. One is going to be a city attorney in Aspen. She's making considerably more money. One has been appointed to the bench. What I think that says about my office is I have great people. I have people that other people want. And that's been, that happens in every single district. And so to say that it's my management style is completely incorrect. He couldn't be more wrong. I have hired another experienced deputy who will come to the office in November. I have another experienced person who wants to come on board. And I think that the same excellent level of trying a case and being a deputy district attorney is going to exist in my office for the next 4 years.
Mr. Cheney.
Out of all 3 of us, I'm the only one who's had professional leadership training. I was trained by the United States Army and In officer candidate school, your whole curriculum is about leadership. An officer is supposed to be, know, and do, to know what they're supposed to do, to be the person they should be. And as a prosecutor, you know how to identify real prosecutors. I don't think it's fair to say these are starting jobs. I think what I have demonstrated when I was the assistant district attorney for 7 years, and by the way, those 2 people that just left Ms. Kaloya's office, I hired. So it's not fair to say that she deserves credit for those 2 people who just moved on to better jobs, because those 2 people were people that I screened, I interviewed, I trained, and I mentored, and I hired. As a leader, you have to have a passion about what you do. I have a passion about being a prosecutor. I have a passion about defending and protecting victims of crime. You know what happens? That becomes an infection, and people don't want to leave. It becomes an infection that inspires and motivates people to the calling of public service. And quite frankly, when I started here, and no offense to Mac Myers, I started out at $31,000 a year, and that was in 2000. But you know what? It was hard for my family to make it on that. But I loved my job, and I had a leader who was a real prosecutor who inspired me, and he was a Democrat. He inspired me to be the best prosecutor that I could be, and I had the capability of doing that as well.
Final question. Ms. Kaloya, and this is another hot topic, question posed by someone from the audience. We've read and heard about in the news about sexual assault cases being treated with leniency. What would you do differently, if anything, in your next term, if you were elected?
Sexual assault cases are not treated with leniency. You read about one case that made it to the media, which was not a sexual assault case, which was not provable, and over the victim's objection, that charge was dismissed. That happens sometimes. Taking a victim through a sexual assault trial is a very serious endeavor, one that victims do not wish to be placed in because it is not comfortable. Defense attorneys will pick them apart. And so that process is something we're very conscious of. I have developed a SART team, sexual assault response team, that meets quarterly to discuss sexual assault investigations and how to do it better. I am just about to open a SANE program to get sexual assault victims an exam after they're assaulted locally in the Valley, because we don't have that at this point. It was discontinued in 2012 because the district attorney's office did not support it. We have a team approach to sexual assaults. We want to make sure that a sexual assault is provable, just like any other case. We do not have a lenient approach to sexual assaults, and they are prosecuted.
Mr. Cheney.
I'd like to share a story from a father of a sexual assault victim. That father was told by the district attorney that I'm not going to prosecute this individual for being a teenager, like you probably were when you were a teenager. Saying that to a victim's father is unacceptable. And there's only one thing you can conclude from that, and that is there is a philosophy of leniency. I served on the board of directors of the Child Advocacy Center, the River Bridge, for many years. I helped establish the stability of that program to provide victims of sexual assault a place where they can come and be interviewed and be supported and be examined and have counseling. And that program is strong today because of the efforts that we invested when we worked at the district attorney's office. I'm glad it's an election year because Ms. Kaloya has had 4 years to start the SART program. And it's taken an election year and the heat of a political process to do the right thing. That's why I have told you, face to face, eye to eye, that integrity is doing the right thing, no matter the politics, no matter the pressure, no matter the partisanship, no matter the time. Within the first 6 months of my tenure, if I have the honor of representing you as the district attorney, I will begin initiating an effective SART program, and I will establish a special sexual assault victim team comprised of individuals, prosecutors, victim advocates who have specialized training to give victims of sexual assault the voice they need and deserve.
Mr. McCrory.
Sexual assault is different. Murder, everyone understands, it carries a life sentence, and we've been inundated with TV shows about solving murders since we were probably about 3 years old. Sexual assault now carries a life sentence in Colorado for most sexual assaults. But sexual assault also carries other sorts of offenses beyond what normally is thought of as rape. Improper touchings, various things like that, all fall under the umbrella of sexual assault. And it is an allegation that is easy to make and can be very difficult to disprove from a defense point of view. Any rational, fair prosecutor is going to look very closely at a sexual assault case. District attorneys do not allow rapists to go free if they can avoid it. But those are difficult cases. They take a great deal of experience to take a look at and see, do we have scientific evidence? There are a number of valid rapes that have never had any DNA evidence or any biological evidence that can be used in court. And so it takes a great deal of experience to analyze and judge what is a proper case or what is not a proper case. And I think that decision lies with the district attorney in consultation with his staff, but I do not think that every problem that a district attorney faces requires a citizen advisory board and a group of other people to get involved in what are extremely personal and delicate matters and should be kept private and privileged with regards to that victim unless and until it's necessary to come to court. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to our closing statements. And I would ask that you would, I know there are probably a lot more questions out there that folks have in the audience or that are listening or watching. And if you could maybe give some contact information, maybe a Facebook page, somehow they could, if they want to ask a question of you. And I would submit that for other candidates as well, if you're accessible between now and Election Day. So we'll begin with closing statements. And Mr. McCrory, 2 minutes.
I've spent 35 years in the criminal law, 16 as a prosecutor, 19 as a defense attorney. I have done everything in a district attorney's office that is required, from appellate work to trial work, and I know what's required to investigate a case, what it takes to work with police and with victims. When I worked in the Aspen DA's office, I learned something new that I had not learned in the big city, which was everyone knew who I was. Defendants would sit down next to me and give me an earful during the Bronco game. Victims would talk to me. Citizens would stop and talk to me. Witnesses, jurors would all sit there and say, I know him. He coached my kid in hockey. That combination of experience in the big city and small town experience is something that I would bring to the district attorney's office. That matched with experience from the defense side so that I know all sides of it is important. If you do not really understand the job, it's impossible to fix the problems with it. I understand that job. I have experience with it. Sherry has not had as much experience in a DA's office as I have. Jeff Cheney has not. In fact, combined, they have less experience in a DA's office than I do. With regards to my experience in the criminal courts, I was last in a court in a criminal court here in Garfield County 5 hours ago. And I'll have my next experience in criminal court in Garfield County, 8:15 tomorrow. I know how to handle these cases, and I would ask for your vote this fall, which is only about a month away, and the ballots come out next week. You can get more information at my website, chipforda.com, or email me at chipforda@gmail. Thank you.
Ms. Kaloyan.
You've heard a lot of things tonight that have challenged my experience, my administration, but the last 4 years have been good. There's not been controversy in the newspaper. There's not been controversy over my administration. It has run smoothly. It has run well. Let's not go back to what we had in 2012 with an administration that was highly controversial and had a lot of problems. Let's not go back to a system in which there's a rubber stamp for police. I believe I've done a good job. I've brought diversion into the valley. That's 80 cases a year in which low-level young offenders can get out of the system. DAs today are running on a platform of they're going to bring diversion. I've done this, and I've been running it for 4 years, and it's very successful. I know how to run a staff. I've done that successfully. I work with the county commissioners on budgeting. My budget is solid every year. I'm within budget. This year they asked me to bring in a budget that was a 0% gain, 0% increase, which I have been able to do. I interact well with coworkers. I'm in court a few times a week. I have tried cases. I have tried jury trials. I have been successful in a private practice. I have done this for 32 years or 33 years. I've been in this community for 28 years. I think I know these communities because I meet with people and people know me out there. They know who I am. They know that I'm somebody who says what I mean and I do what I say. There's not a lot of fluff in there. It can ruffle some feathers at some times, but you know who I am. And talk about integrity. I think I've got integrity. I think you can trust me. I think I've done a good job. I've gotten a lot of compliments, and I've been asked to run for re-election, and I ask for your vote this fall.
Mr. Cheney, 2 minutes.
From one end of this district to the other, I have been approached by Democrats, independents, and Republicans asking for a change in leadership at our DA's office. We need a change in our DA's office because we need a person who is a true leader, who knows how to implement servant leadership, who does what they ask others to do and never ask another to do something they're not willing to do. This district is personal to me. 24 years ago, I sat on top of Mount Sopris and I asked my wife to marry me. And after I proposed to her, we looked down on the lights of this city in Carbondale, and we wanted to make it our home. And we did that 18 years ago. I've raised my family here. I've bought my first home here. And it's personal to me that our community be safe again, that law enforcement know that they have a district attorney who truly wants to be the district attorney. I agree that extremes are unacceptable. And so if one would classify 2012, the previous administration, as an extreme, I would classify the administration we have now as an extreme to the other end of the spectrum. What we need is we need balance. We need a true prosecutor who knows how to be a prosecutor. I've not been a defense attorney for the last 20 years. I've been a prosecutor for 10 years, and I've tried every level of case. And you have my personal and my professional commitment that I will do everything I can every day I wake up and come to work in the building next door to make our community safe and to work with anyone and everyone in the justice system whose goal is the same. And I ask for your vote this November. Thank you.
Thank you to the candidates. And finally, I would ask that the Garfield County Commissioner candidates approach the dais. We'll begin with opening statements and going alphabetically. We'll begin with Mr. John Acha.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is John Acha. I'm running for county commissioner. I grew up in a small town called Gooding, Idaho, just outside of Twin Falls. It's a lot like Rifle. Caters to the construction community of Sun Valley and Haley, just as Garfield County caters to the construction of Pitkin County. In 1992, I joined the Air Force. left for the Air Force and I became a contracting officer, whereas I wrote and administered government defense contracts. Matter of fact, one of the first projects I ever worked on was Lowry Air Force Base, where we turned it over to the state. From there, I went to Idaho. I was stationed at Idaho. I had to drive 104 miles to enlist, and they stationed me 54 miles from home. Continued my career, and I went on to Japan, and later I worked throughout Europe. I've worked on major defense contracts. Matter of fact, the last contract that I worked on after leaving Europe had a dollar amount of $365 million. It was called the Sabre contract. I've worked with politicians in the political career field. I've worked firsthand for a number of dignitaries while I was in the service. The Clintons, Al Gore, I worked personally for them while I was in the service. While I was in the service, the government felt that I had a need to go to college, so they sent me to go to college. So I worked full-time active duty Air Force, full-time student after work. Traveled. I've managed construction projects in 24 countries and 27 states. After leaving Europe, I married my wife, and 2 years later, we moved out here to Garfield County. Oh, sorry, go ahead. That's quick.
Goes fast. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Milhorn. 8 a.m. yesterday morning, the county attorney and I sat in her conference room, and the legal representation for the Central Committee for the Democratic Party of Garfield County and the chair of that, Bob Shively, leveled 4 different demands on me. Resign immediately, remove your name from the ballot, assure us that there will be no vacancy committee formed to replace you, and do this within 48 hours, or we will seek an indictment and remove you from office through malfeasance. 17 different items that they gave me, and by the way, they are public, and you may have a copy if you would like to on the reasons why, as well as a draft indictment that was leveled on me. They said if they do not meet those demands within that 48 hours, and they reiterated numerous times that they would indict me. However, if I was to meet those demands, they would then allow me to quietly retire and move and relocate my new life in Delta County. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not respond well, or should I say pleasantly, to threats and intimidation. What I will do is answer to you, the public. I refuse to resign. I refuse to remove my name, and I surely will not move to Delta County in the middle of the night. What I will do is I will stand and fight for my reputation. What I will do is stand and fight for my reputation.
Sense of courtesy. Ask you to stop, please, or excuse yourself. Thank you. Continue.
Thank you.
Another
Thank you.
30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Milhorn. What I will do is I will stand and fight and defend my reputation, my accomplishments. I will defend the Board of County Commissioners, their decisions. I will defend the citizens and the staff and the other elected officials of Garfield County. I will not succumb to threat and intimidation. Thank you.
First question, begin with Mr. Martin. When it comes to mineral extraction, oil and gas development, where do you draw the line when it comes to local control versus state regulations handed down by the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission?
Use, air quality control, monitoring, water quality control, and private property rights, and a balance with, again, with the state regulations. Meeting with citizens, information, inform what they can expect, and any kind of land use, have a public and open hearing, and if it is passed, have conditions of approval that are acceptable not only to the citizens, but the person trying to extract minerals.
Mr. Rocha, 90 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, First off, I'd like to see a copy of that, if I could. I haven't seen that yet. And I wasn't at the meeting. But with regards to the land use question, I'd like to see as much authority be given to the local politicians as possible. I believe that, I'm not one to believe that we can ever get away from the petroleum industry. The petroleum industry is here, but we have to ensure that the petroleum industry adheres to the laws and regulations that we have on the books. And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, petroleum has to be extracted safely. And our citizens of this county deserve that. And that's what we're here for. We're stewards to ensure that the safety and well-being of the citizens of this county are the number one priority. And that is first and foremost in any extraction of hydrocarbons.
Those are in place at the present time. We coordinate our efforts with the state of Colorado, the BLM, and the Forest Service. We adhere to all our land use regulations and are always open to any kind of text amendments or concerns of the citizens, as we have responded numerous times since 2004.
Next question, I think, with Mr. Acha. You've mentioned on your campaign Facebook page an issue that I'd like explained in a little more detail. The question of whistleblowing. What exactly are you referring to within the context of county government? How is that a problem?
Ladies and gentlemen, initially when I chose to run for office, I had a stampede of present and former county employees that have come to me, some of which said we could go ahead and use their names, and others were adamant not to use their name because they were afraid of reprisal. And quite frankly, you know, Mr. Martin, he had mentioned about the core documents that my campaign secured. My campaign spent a lot of money to secure those, and the reason being is I'm a numbers guy. I got a contracting background. I have to know how stuff works and how it functions. The intent of getting those documents were to just that. I had to understand the mechanics of how the current government works, how the money's being spent, what systems are out there, and basically how the whole program works. Now, my concern with the former and the current employees that came to me, ladies and gentlemen, they were pointing us to where the bodies were buried. You know, we were talking, Mr. Martin mentioned about some of the indiscretions and concerns that were discovered by the investigators for the Democratic Party. There are serious concerns, ladies and gentlemen, serious concerns that you're not aware of. Now, Mr. Martin, he continually goes up and down the county and he says, I stand behind all my decisions, and look at this treasure trove that we're warehousing of $100+ million. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if some of the accusations that these people are saying are true, and one good attorney in a class action suit, that $100 million goes away. That's what I'm concerned about, and I want to protect that. We have to be open and free. I'm sorry.
Mr. Martin. Yes.
There are federal statutes that protect people right now. There are state statutes that protect people right now. There is a policy, and it's a written policy in Garfield County that is adhered to. Anyone that has a concern has the direct route, which is in the hand manual, to every employee and every elected official on what it will be. It is to go, again, to the human services person, to the department heads, to elected official, et cetera. There are many avenues that information can be relayed and kept confidential, and an investigation or allegation either sustained or overturned. So what it amounts to is it's in place right now, and we adhere to it, and we've seen many issues come forward.
Response or rebuttal?
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been victimized by whistleblowing. I brought a whistleblower case to the Inspector General at Washington, D.C. with regards to the White River National Forest, where millions of dollars worth of construction projects were being swayed toward the I-25 corridor when we had a 67% unemployment rate in construction in Garfield County. And when I voiced my opinion, when I stood up, when I said, no, these laws are in place at the federal level, and we're not adhered to it. And I was told by my direct supervisor, my job is I have more vested in my career than you do. Now, I didn't accept that answer. I fought for you. I took it to the Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, it's in 10th District Court right now. If it isn't resolved at that level, the only other court in this country that can hear it is the Supreme Court. It's true. We've got policies in place. And the effect and authority is about that of a bumper sticker. The truth of the matter, I have drafted a contract with the employees of this county where I will guarantee their protection under a whistleblower contract. I will guarantee that where they will be protected better than federal employees. And what that does, they know the system better. They can show us what's going on. They can show us what's happening behind the curtain, the scenes, and so forth. They are the best watchdog that we have right now at our availability. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, for those that couldn't attend the Public Lands Candidate Forum a couple of weeks ago in Carbondale, would you talk about your stance on state versus federal control? Should state and local governments like Garfield County that are surrounded by public land have a say in how they're managed?
Absolutely. They are the public lands. We are part of the public. They affect us directly and they affect us indirectly. What amounts to we have a lot of visitors. We have a lot of demands. We love several areas to death. We need to have a say, again, in public lands and how they're managed. Garfield County does that right now. They assist also the Forest Service, the BLM, in trail management, in campground management. We even have people hired to assist on Hanging Lake Trail and parking lot duty. We also sit and are a consulting agent, or should we say, or a cooperating agency status on numerous issues on land use, from travel management, sage grouse, oil and gas, and RMPs, which is the resource management. We take a very active role in that, and we encourage the state to do the same.
Mr. Rocha.
Ladies and gentlemen, the truth of the matter is, on a local level, we cannot 100% control what happens in our national forests. You've got a population of the United States, 300 million people. That's 150 million people for a tax base. Here in Garfield County, we've got 15,000 people as a tax base. If you've got expenses on if we were to take over White River National Forest and had to take those expenses and disperse it over 15,000 taxpayers, we couldn't afford it. The truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, the program that's in place is a good program. We just have to stick with it. We have to utilize it. Now, if the lands are transferred, the people, where are you going to find people that have the funds available to be able to control those lands? That's on the corporate level. So if you take lands, whether it be on the federal level or the state level, there you turn it over to the corporate level. And you know, the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, whenever that happens, all that is a way to sidestep environmental protection laws. You put it in private hands, and then all those EPA regulations go away. And who knows what's coming down, coming off the runoff and out of those mountains or into our rivers from the flat tops out here. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to keep it the way it is, because we need to have that environmental protections and the power of the federal government behind that protection. And that's the simple truth, numbers wise. It just doesn't make sense for us to take it on personally.
Mr. Milhorn, did I misunderstand the statement in the reference to management of public lands or in the transfer?
Versus federal control of public lands, something that was discussed at the Public Lands Candidate Forum a couple weeks ago.
Again, it's control. It's actually in the ownership of the federal government unless otherwise transferred to the state, and they do supersede the state in reference to managing federal lands. So taking an active role in both federal and state management is a responsibility of local government.
Mr. Rocha, I'd like your opinion on the county's well-documented negotiations, battle, if you will, with the BLM over and the Interior Department over the sage grouse and the efforts to keep it off the endangered species list. What was your opinion of how that was handled? If you agree or disagree, how would you have done it differently?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, sage grouse, mule deer, what have you, are wildlife. They're an asset, and they have to be managed. The sage grouse and our animal population and so forth, it has to coincide with the petroleum industry. And if we're going to let the petroleum industry into our backyard to extract that petroleum, we're going to need to do so in such a way that we disturb the natural habitat as little as possible. What we need to do is we need to take what the needs of our wildlife into consideration, and we need to incorporate those needs with the design of anything that we do out there. This is going to affect us. This is our natural, this right here is our heritage. This is the reason that makes Colorado great. And we have to take care of it, because this is what brings people out here. There are people, there are those among us in the community that actually use that wildlife and those resources to provide for their family. And so we can't take away their livelihood. We have to come up with a system where it works for everybody. And what that means is a little bit of common sense design in the design and just good stewardship of the land. And that's what we need to adhere to, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Martin.
We were asked in 2008 to sit down with BLM, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, State of Colorado, and all agencies, local governments, landowners, etc., and come up with a working plan for sage grouse. We did that. So did 6 other communities within the state of Colorado. They were recognized by all those agencies and adopted by the state of Colorado and those regions. After that, the BLM came out with a new plan after a lawsuit that says one plan has to cover all of 14 states and 2 provinces in Canada to save the sage grouse. It is based upon habitat. Mapping was erroneous in Colorado, and especially in Garfield County, based upon things that could not be replicated. We hired biologists, cartographers, satellite imagery, etc., and came down, and we can identify to 2 meters everything in the habitat. We showed that those maps to BLM, and we proved our biology, etc. We stand by those, and we are, number one, trying to manage the sage grouse through that management plan and the correct biology and the correct identified habitat. And we have testified numerous times in Congress and worked with BLM, and they're nearly, again, reconsidering our mapping and our science. We are very proud of what we did.
Rebuttal?
Ladies and gentlemen, everything John Martin has said is true. They did it. They proved that, you know, that as the oil rigs and stuff go in, the sage grouse are gonna move, and there's plenty of land. But the problem that they didn't put in their study was the fact that, you know, the field mice are gonna move, the coyote's gonna move, the bobcat's gonna move. And all we've done is we're crowding all the animals into less space. We've brought the predators to the dinner table. We have to look at the environment as a whole, not just the sage grouse. We got to look at everything. You drive, ladies and gentlemen, when you drive home this afternoon, I want you to look at the freeway. How there was a program for all the ramps for the deer so that they wouldn't get hit and those oil semis wouldn't be hitting those deers anymore. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the truth of the matter is drive up and down the freeway. Every one of those ramps are overridden with weeds because the deer aren't using them. The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, we have to look at it as a whole. We can't just look at the sage grouse. We got to look at it as a whole. And that's where the studies fell short.
After years of abundance, 2017 looks to be a challenging year, 18 as well, in terms of the budget. What are some of the challenges that you would meet head on as a commissioner if you were reelected?
Number one, we will, and we do have a balanced budget based upon our income and our operating expenses. What we have done is to adjust into our capital and the projects that cost a lot of money. We also look at our reserves. We do have reserves, and that's what they are for. However, there are 19 funds that can only be used for those purposes. One example of trying to make the downfall or the downturn in revenue is to eliminate a mill levy in Road and Bridge. We have $31 million, I do believe, in reserve for the Road and Bridge. That's 2.5 times their annual budget. If we do that and put that 1.5 mil into general fund, we're able to accumulate $5.5 to $6 billion for that shortfall. We can also then assist the municipalities by writing grants for infrastructure, which they are entitled to under road and bridge mill levies, to the same amount of 1.5 mils that they would receive, keeping those communities whole, but also keeping 5.6 million out of reserve and putting it actually into work for general fund and other areas that we need to, again, boost our revenue. That's what we're going to do. We also have the ability to move dollars from our energy mitigation fund, which is the rainy day fund, which we set up a long time ago. And we saved every dime, expecting bad times. Bad times are going to start in 17. They're going to continue into 18 and 19. However, we will have a balanced budget, live within our means.
Mr. Acha, if elected, how would you manage the budget given the...
Ladies and gentlemen, it's true. For years and stuff, we've had it good. We've had it good. We brought in lots of money, and the council has been good about warehousing money and storing it for a rainy day. But have you ever seen a roofer roof a house in a blizzard? No. The reason for it is any good roofer knows you get the work done when times are good. And that's what we need to do, ladies and gentlemen. We need to diversify. We need to change our economy. Our economy cannot strictly be based solely on the petroleum industry. We need to bring in other industries so that when we do have times like we do today where we're expecting a shortfall, the other industries are going to be there to pick it up, and we're going to be able to press on. That's what we need to do. We need to be just like a farmer. We need to hold back we needed to, and this should have been done years ago. We need to hold back the seeds, plant those seeds so that we can have a harvest in the future. And that's the program that I'm looking to institute. Always moving forward, always looking to the future. Not 3 years, not 5 years, but 30, 50 years. We put together what we have and goals for the county. That's what the county commissioner's job is to do. Then he turns around and takes those desires to the county manager, and the county manager is going to put together the program. That's what we need to do, ladies and gentlemen. Build for the future, 30, 50 years ahead of us. Thank you.
Rebuttal?
We have a great investment team headed by the treasurer, and we have done very well. The return to us is nearly $1 million a year in reference to just the interest alone that we have invested. We have diversed that. We have guaranteed funds coming back. We have a budget that is adjustable. We have enough funds in every budget, that's every fund balance, for at least 1 to 1.5 years without any more revenue. We can survive. There is not a panic in the budget world. We have experts in budget. They have won awards for the last 7 years nationally for the budgeting process. We work with them. We review every elected officials. We work, again, on 2 different budgets, operations and capital. We are very secure. We are concerned, true, but we're not in a panic, and we're not spending every dime that we have put away over the past 15 years.
Final question, beginning with Mr. Acha. If you were elected, you'd be the only Democrat. Without making this too political, how would you seek common ground?
In the fall every year when I was a kid, my grandfather and I, we used to go back to the North 40. We used to cut the firewood so that we were ready in the wintertime. And I remember one time as a kid, I asked Grandpa, how come we're always cutting down these cottonwoods? They're full of sap and they're heavy, and why do we always do that? Why don't we go down and cut some of those willows down by the creek? Grandpa says, you know, last spring when the spring storms, the cottonwood fell, so it's dried up, and we're going to take that home. The reason it dried up is because that cottonwood stood strong, firm, and wouldn't budge, and the wind knocked it over. With a willow, it learns how to compromise, sway in the wind, compromise, find common ground. That's why I never cut into a willow growing up as a kid. That's a good lesson to be learned. It's one that my grandpa taught me, and it's one I'm going to take to the city council. Be flexible. Learn. Democrat, Republican, we're all Garfield County citizens. We're going to find the common ground. It's great. You know, I will be the only Democrat. But that's all right. I'll bring a different perspective to it. Maybe one that wasn't thought of before. That's all I can do. I can go in, try to do the best job I can. I've spent the last 25 years not knowing it, but for the last 25 years I've been preparing for this position, and I'm ready for it. And I ask for your vote so that I can take over the reins. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, I would rephrase the question for you. In the past, how have you been able to work out differences with fellow commissioners?
Finding the common ground, number one, and to make sure that you have common ground. Identify what the real issue is and not ideology. What you also have to do is have respect for one another. And you have to have a chemistry, understanding how people talk, how they move, what their priorities are. And the next one is having the willingness to make compromise on that common ground. It can be done. It is difficult. We have a rule of two. Not one commissioner can make any final rule. It takes two. It's a majority. And I've found myself on the one side. I've found myself on the two side. And so as each other two commissioners have that same experience. We don't always agree, but we also have to find respect, chemistry, and common ground, and we will get along.
Thoughts, rebuttal?
That's what I said. We've got compromise. Find that middle ground. Find that common ground. We're going to find the path, the best path for the citizens of Garfield County. That, in a nutshell, that's what it is. Cooperation, communication. That is what we need to do to lay the groundwork for success, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
All right, before we wrap things up, while I have a captive audience, I want to thank our sponsors, Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association, the Glenwood Springs Post-Independent, KMTS, State Farm Insurance agents Jeff Leonard and Dee McCown. Special thanks to the City of Glenwood Springs for allowing us to host the event at City Hall. Thanks to our timer, Susie Strauss, who really wanted to use a beanbag or a taser, but I said no. And thanks to the interested voter. Do your homework. This is a big ballot, a very important election. Be informed, be educated before you cast your ballot. Ballots go out, they go in the mail Monday, so be prepared. All right, we move on to closing statements, and we begin with Mr. Martin, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Ron, and thank everybody for being here. I had a small outburst this beginning, and I think it was warranted. In my 20 years as an elected official and 25 years as a policeman, I have never cast dispersions on any one individual. I have never resorted to mud throwing or name calling. And I'm going to live up to that. I'm not going to do the same. I'm going to lead with honor, with respect, and have the highest and greatest respect for the citizens of Garfield County because they are #1 priority in my life. And I will work with each and every one of the elected officials, and I will take criticism, and I will, if elected, serve with honor and great pride to represent one of the greatest counties, the top 2% in the nation, right here in Garfield County. Thank you for letting me serve. I hope that you would be able to allow me to do 4 more years, at which time then I can be an instructor, a sage, and an institutional knowledge distributor. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rocha, 2 minutes.
I respect what John just said about not throwing mud and what have you. But being a leader is a difficult burden. Simple truth is, ladies and gentlemen, as a leader, it's your responsibility to always tell the truth. Sometimes that truth may not be popular. It may be easier in cases to overlook it or simply sidestep it, but the truth is, the people always deserve to know the truth. And ladies and gentlemen, sometimes when you're telling the truth, you've got to say things and do things that aren't popular. But that's the burden of leadership. And you have to be a strong leader. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the simple truth is, I came across a saying years ago back in Turkey in my travels, and it went something like this. It said that a pride of lions led by a lamb are no match for a flock of sheep led by a lion. That's true, ladies and gentlemen, but sometimes if you're going to be that lion, you have to say things and do things that are unpopular, but they need to be done. And that's what it takes to be a leader. To be a leader, sometimes you have to do what's required, even if it's unpopular. The truth is, as our leaders, you should expect no less than for them to always tell you the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, I promise you, I promise the citizens of Garfield County, my first campaign promise ever in my life, I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, I will always tell you the truth as I understand it. I will always tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And I say that not as a campaign thing. That is a saying I use all the time in my life. And the reason being is, I learned a long time ago, ladies and gentlemen, if you simply tell the truth, it's easier because you never have to remember anything. Now, it makes you unpopular, just like at the Forest Service when I put in that investigation. But sometimes you need somebody to tell those inconvenient truths. Thank you.
Thank you very much.